On January 7th, 2026, while lawfully observing ICE officers in Minnesota, Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed.
The video is believed to be taken by the ICE agent who fired the shots.
The offending officer claimed he was acting in self-defense, alleging that Good attempted to run him over with her car. Vice President J.D. Vance publicly blamed Good for the killing, saying that it was a tragedy of her own making.
You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. I can believe that her death is a tragedy, while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe, against our law enforcement officers.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem labeled Good a domestic terrorist.
If you look at what the definition of domestic terrorism is, it completely fits the situation on the ground. This individual, as you saw in the video that we released just 48 hours after this incident, showed that this officer was hit by her vehicle, she weaponized it, and he defended his life and those colleagues around him and the public.
Videos of her death spread on social media like wildfire, showing multiple angles of the incident. The public does not believe this is an open and shut case. The officers remain actively employed despite the obvious trauma and public fallout. 17 days later, ICE officers shot and killed Alex Preddy, a veteran and ICU nurse, for allegedly brandishing a gun. Border Control Commander-at-Large Gregory Bavino accused Preddy of attempting to massacre law enforcement. Video evidence later showed that Alex's gun had been removed from his person before he was shot. The Trump administration scrambled to demonize the victims. The public is not buying it. Now the streets of Minnesota are filled with screams, and they aren't getting any quieter. The people want justice. They want revenge. We are a country drowning in grief, and it's driving us fucking insane. When we're handed death after death after death and expected to continue on as normal, it's like pouring salt on an open wound. Loss like that changes us. Our world becomes more reactionary and aggressive, and the lines between right and wrong start to dissolve. These impulses turn into protests, riots, and online mobs. Grief is used as a weapon, whether we like it or not. It seeps into our ideologies like a parasite. How does a nation react when innocent lives are taken in the name of a political ideology? And what if those lives don't seem so innocent?
And good evening. Tonight, a new chapter in this era of political violence.
Images show the tools prosecutors say Vance Belter used in the deadly rampage he planned for months.
Protesters caution with police and some arrests being made.
They're mad. I'm mad. We should all be mad.
It has been going on for a long time.
Attempted murder and 22 counts of arson.
If people are crying about Charlie, why aren't they crying about the school shootings?
A lot of my peers have fallen into what has become known as the black pill left ideology. There's just this growing sense within my generation that we're all fucked. Like there's nothing we can do about it. Our systems don't serve us, our leaders lie and cheat, life is absurdly stressful despite living in one of the most successful economies in the world. I really don't blame anyone for losing trust in democracy, especially considering what it enabled to happen with this presidency. We feel powerless, like nothing we do has any impact on the world around us. And I felt like that for a while. Honestly, I've felt it my entire life. Nobody chose to be born in this time period. If given the chance, I think we'd all pass for a more chill time. But when has the human race ever been chill? Harley Morenstein aside.
Remind me to tell you about the times when I used to not be chill.
I
was like 7. I was 7 and I would choke myself if I didn't get what I wanted.
What the fuck?
Don't worry, I'm chill now.
Well,
started smoking weed, got fucking chill smoking weed.
We're the most insane species on the planet. Despite our insanity, we're always trying to push the boundaries of our capabilities, and that requires reluctant cooperation. I grew up despising anyone who wasn't left-wing because it felt like a direct attack on my morality. I wasn't raised with a religion or some other belief system that helps people address these big questions. Like, why would anyone vote for a convicted sexual predator? Looking back, I think a lot of my values came from Sesame Street. I'm not even kidding. Kids shows that portray a world where we all have love for one another and we all get along gave me this vision of what the future should look like. But you can't talk to a TV show, and I couldn't ask questions. I went based on pure vibes and built my support system around the people who agreed with me. It feels inherently wrong to hate other people. It feels inherently wrong to deny due process to immigrants. It feels inherently wrong to work within a system that harms the people that I care about. And on the surface, this makes sense. Treating others how I'd like to be treated is pretty much my entire life philosophy. But when the conversation stops at, they're just immoral, it makes it seem like there's no significant thought behind their beliefs, like they're just less intelligent than us. This thinking leads us to believe that because we're righteous and moral, it doesn't matter what happens to those who aren't, because they're less than us, and human. We dismiss their concerns, even if there's an element of truth to them, and in turn, they lose trust for us. Even though I wasn't raised with religion, I still grew up believing that the world is full of demons. The unfortunate fact of life is that we need to have conversations with the people that we disagree with, even if it's uncomfortable. Doing so brings us the understanding that the world isn't full of inherently evil people. Most of those people are just scared, like we are, looking for anyone to validate their fears, their grief. They don't want their emotions dismissed as crazy or stupid. When this sort of cognitive distortion happens in politics, it can make things seem a lot more hopeless than they actually are. Not only that, but thanks to our American education system, we as a population still don't have like a baseline understanding of how our government is structured. I mean, I was in AP history and I still barely understood what my teacher was trying to convey at the time. All the focus was on passing the AP exam, not understanding the reality of our adult lives. Unsurprisingly, I failed the exam and I dropped down to the college prep course, where we just sat around filling out worksheets and watching movies. My history teacher was a football coach. Didn't really give a shit about teaching, but he was a super nice guy. But that left me to sort through all of these systems on my own. And for a while, I thought I was doing a pretty good job of it. Having come out as trans in high school, I didn't think I had any choice other than to involve myself in politics. I mean, the government actively wanted to take away my right to healthcare and freedom. Was I supposed to just sit by and let that happen? I labeled myself a queer advocate, and I made it my life's goal to right these wrongs. I felt so vindicated in my positions. I would try to educate my peers on what it meant to be trans at every chance that I got, correcting their language, debunking myths, and denouncing Donald Trump. And while my positions haven't changed, my entire approach has. Because while this is technically politics, I still had no concept of local power or what the states actually can or can't do. My whole mission was based on emotion, which is important, but it only makes up half the story. It wasn't until I started visiting the library on my own as an adult that I actually began to understand how our government operates. What I saw as inaccessible power was actually just really boring. And because it's boring, nobody sees change happening when it should. I mean, positive news stories of change and growth within our communities don't typically do as well as outrage content does. And yes, the system is undeniably unfair, but it's also contestable. Shirley Chisholm, one of the first black women to serve in the US House of Representatives, said this: "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." We have to make do with what we have access to, and we see progress happening every single day. I mean, even despite this horrible, evil administration, we have Sarah McBride, the highest-ranking trans-elected official in the nation, and for sure she has not had an easy go of it, but she stays resilient in the face of injustice, especially at a time where our rights as trans people are under direct threat from the president. And we need her now more than ever. And you never hear about it, but in 2024 alone, 37 pro-equality bills had been passed into law, with several hundred being introduced each year. This country is capable of change, and we don't need to wait to do it. But the average citizen is really struggling to trust that their elected leaders will hold true to their word, especially with the Epstein case showing the absolute corruption that exists within our systems. When people stop believing in governmental structures, they haven't given up on justice. They just don't believe it can come from institutions. But this is where things get scary for me, because it creates space for vigilantes to take the law into their own hands. And I'm not just talking about Luigi Mangione. I'm talking about cancel culture as a whole. I'm talking about people using the little power that they have, their energy, money, and voice, to bring down those they see as a threat to their communities. But this creates a problem. There's no solid rules. We feel the need to hold each other accountable through punishment and performance. Think about the black square fad of 2020. Everyone did it, but it wasn't necessarily because they believed in the message. They just felt a lot of societal pressure to be morally correct. We assume guilt until proven innocent, and that innocence is extremely conditional. We retroactively decide who deserves space to breathe based on old tweets, affiliations, and proximity to those deemed enemies. Sometimes this search for justice becomes violent, because if the police won't do something, maybe we have to. Vigilante justice is a dangerous game. When we allow civilians to play God, we eliminate due process for criminals, and we remove agency from the people to respond in the way that they see fit. But I know a lot of you are coming to believe that violent resistance is the only way out. Not because you're evil, and not because you want to harm others or anything, but because you're fed up with how you've been treated. But personally, I don't believe that violence will lead to the results that you're looking for. You're forcing your beliefs onto the society at large, not persuading them into joining your side. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, the right cried out with a fresh, burning hatred for the left. And all I could think about that day was how his children will blame the deepest trauma of their lives on us. On the left. Now, of course, the actions of one man are not representative of the whole, but we cannot ignore the impact this shooting had on our already fragile politics. When people are grieving, they don't want to hear about how awful of a person the deceased was. Even if it's true, they're far less likely to engage in civil debate. They want validation and revenge, and that makes change so much harder to achieve. Social media channels are incentivized to make the trauma last for weeks or even months after the fact. The people who watch those creators are looking for validation. They want to find easy answers to extremely complicated questions. They're not looking for someone who will talk to them rationally. And Candace Owens is not a rational person. Since Charlie's death, she's been experiencing what seems to be a mental health crisis, claiming that Charlie is a time traveler.
It is an absolute fact that Charlie Kirk thought that he was a time traveler. He told me he was a time traveler repeatedly.
That she talks to him in her dreams, that there was a conspiracy at Turning Point to murder him.
And there's other explicable events and things like Charlie telling me that he was going to die young.
And even when Charlie's widow asks her to stop, she just keeps going.
Talk to me about this part of the conspiracies that are out there. People are trying to guess where Charlie is.
Can I have one thing where I don't have to be worried about some secular revolutionary coming and destroying my husband's grave while my daughter is sitting there praying?
So objectively, I agree with what she's saying, okay? But subjectively, because we are dealing with the subject of Erica Kirk and what transpired immediately following Charlie's assassination, this is going to be read as Meghan Markle syndrome.
She's been profiting off of his death from the moment that it happened, posting content to her YouTube channel that makes upwards of $15,000 a month. And it's obvious to outsiders what's happening, but all of her viewers are just mourners. They don't want to hear about how they might be supporting lies. I mean, look at these comments. They just want to hear from Charlie's friend about his life. Now, Charlie, in my opinion, was a piece of shit.
And the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon. And her daughter, all of a sudden came home and said, I'm a boy. They wanted to give her cross-sex hormones. They wanted to give her testosterone therapy. They wanted to cut off her breasts. They wanted to do all these sorts of things. And these doctors do this without any thought whatsoever. These doctors need to be put in prison quickly. We need to have a Nuremberg-style trial for every gender-affirming clinic doctor. We need it immediately. I want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
It's really not surprising to see protesters celebrating outside of his memorial. I don't blame them for feeling free. But does that make this an effective tool for political change?
I think we should respect his beliefs. He didn't believe in empathy. So I think we should respect his beliefs and not have any empathy for him. This is his quote. He said this about the death penalty. He wanted public executions.
How many minds were changed by this woman's sign? What happened aside from maybe a couple of shouting matches that thankfully didn't escalate? The hardest part about mass grief is that it can be manipulated and warped into a weapon of mass destruction. Conservative pundits reframe Charlie's death as proof that the left is just morally asymmetrical, using it as an excuse to withhold sympathy for Renee Good and Alex Pretty.
He allowed leftists to speak, and in doing so, they revealed that they were unhinged, incoherent, dangerous radicals, which is why they killed him.
Because some of us withheld sympathy for them, they see no reason to hold sympathy for us. Even if you don't believe Charlie deserved empathy, even if you don't believe he deserved respect, we have a responsibility to one another to be role models to future generations. Our kids will only learn to be better people by seeing us in action. Nobody seems to think about the kids these days. I graduated high school in 2017. My entire primary school career came in the wake of Columbine. Sandy Hook happened while I was a freshman in high school. Every time we did an active shooter drill, my heart sank. I'd hold my breath. Sometimes kids would get antsy and start talking, only to be angrily hushed by the teacher. In America, we grow up with the constant threat of violence. It could be a school shooter, a bully, your family, or even yourself. Some of us didn't get to graduate with our friends. It's really fucking hard to be a kid in America because death has become so normalized. Newer generations have higher rates of PTSD than any other previous generation. I've personally lost friends to suicide and gun violence, and it's heavy to hold. And now it feels like every 2 weeks we get murder footage on Twitter for everyone to see. How are you supposed to cope when this is in your face all of the time? How can we expect rationality when this is just not a rational era of existence? We're desensitized to violence and pain. Everyone's just constantly looking over their shoulder waiting for the other shoe to drop. Anger is expected, but we don't really talk about what to do with it. And I really worry about these kids. I know my high school career was awful, but this is a whole new ballgame. All this desensitization makes it harder to feel what we need to feel to overcome the grief. It can make it feel like nobody cares about the pain at all. And if someone doesn't care, then that makes them evil and immoral. But people do care. You're not alone in the weight that you carry. Whenever there's a shooting, people cry out. Every single time. It's not normal for people to die so early and so violently. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. How do we give those we've lost a proper goodbye? How do we find closure while making sure that their legacy is remembered? Sometimes the best place to look is the very beginning. Since the dawn of time, humans have come up with funeral rituals that provide comfort to loved ones and celebrate the life of the dead. Judaism formalizes grief through 7 days of Shiva, where mourners gather and support those grieving with meals and prayer. For an entire year, they engage in the recitation of the mourner's Kaddish, something that can only be done as a community. Christianity comforts the grieving with prayers and song, promising eternal life with their Savior in heaven. In some denominations, they allow visitors to spend one final moment with the deceased before burial, offering a sense of closure and grounding in reality. Islam takes care in the small details. First, the body is washed with love and shrouded in a plain white cloth. All Muslims, rich or poor, powerful and powerless, are buried the same, and the simplicity is intentional. The body is buried facing the holy city of Mecca, and the grave is filled by hand by family and other members of the community. Across traditions, grief is organized through ritual, then carried by the community from generation to generation. No one has to invent how to mourn because the framework already exists. But something strange is happening to our relationship with organized religion. In a study by Pew Research Center, 44% of those surveyed had left their religion of origin. The most predominant reason for leaving is vague. I just stopped believing in the religion's teachings. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they stop believing that murder is bad, but a talking, burning bush doesn't really mesh with our current understanding of science. The next most common reasons suggest a quieter drift. It wasn't important in my life, or I gradually drifted away. Faith, which was once this core pillar of humanity, has now become so unimportant that we feel compelled to shed it entirely. Of that 44% who left their origin religion, 20% now no longer identify with a religion at all. And to me, that's kind of sad. Faith provides certain outlets that are inaccessible, or at the very least, very difficult to attain without it. Community. a place for repentance and growth. Rituals and meditation that provide framework for mental wellness that every therapist would suggest. But we all know that faith isn't simple. It's easily misused, just like grief. Many people leave because of abuse or betrayal within religious institutions. Pew finds that 34% cited scandals involving clergy, and 29% cited mistreatment of women. And in traditions like Christianity, where forgiveness is central, that emphasis can sometimes be exploited by people who have no real intention of changing. And that puts a reputation of hypocrisy on organized religion, and it damages our trust for those institutions. It's no wonder that people walk away. But still, abandoning faith entirely poses its own set of problems. Grief doesn't disappear with belief in a higher power, but it makes it a hell of a lot easier to bear, especially when it comes to people who love and care about you. When we don't have that support in place, we're forced to find other ways to navigate loss. And that's part of what causes that powerless feeling. A dull, aching pain that doesn't seem to go away. It looks for any excuse to lash out and feels some type of vindication. And now, I'm not saying you have to be religious to fix this problem. People are finding new ways every day to adapt to modern grief. Friends raise money and bring meals to their neighbors. People are finally seeking therapy and other mental health treatments. We even have witchcraft and other New Age spirituality practices that let the user take control of their own destiny. The thing about grief is that it's messy and unpredictable. It's easy to talk about coping with the pain, but in reality, it's more like scaling a mountain. And what has me deeply worried is how we go about handling those massive emotions when we don't have support in place. Personally, I'm not good at protests. I have a hard time with crowds and loud noises, and I don't think that I can handle a confrontation with police. But I'm starting to understand that that's okay. I'm not the only one. Our brains aren't built to recover from trauma that fast. We need time to process what just happened. We need sleep, we need friendship, we need distance, because when we don't, we become bombs. In high-intensity moments, we stop thinking long-term because the next 5 minutes could literally save a life. But successful movements survive on those who can think long-term while others are overwhelmed. They survive on calm logistics, exit plans, and people who can assess risk while everyone else is grieving. Assessing the pain doesn't always mean screaming and fighting in the streets. Sometimes it's taking a few days to hibernate. Sometimes it's calling a friend to ground you in reality. Sometimes it's getting treatment at a mental health facility. And I'm here to argue that these things make you stronger and smarter, not weaker. A lot of people will pressure you to act immediately after a tragedy occurs. That pressure comes from a real sense of fear and injustice. But immediate action is not always effective action. Sometimes the most strategic move is absence. Sometimes stepping back today means you're steady enough to show up tomorrow, and next month, and next year. Because unfortunately, we know that there will be a next time. So the question is, do you want to burn out in the first wave, or still be standing when it matters most? When I think about these new generations going out and making noise in protest of revolution, I see a lot of myself in them. I spent a lot of my high school years scrambling for any way to express this rage and fear. Then one day, I stumbled across a poet. Their name was Andrea Gibson. Their poem, The Nutritionist, acted like an anchor, getting me through those years with the relief that I wasn't alone. I memorized it, and I started to recite it to myself during the bad moments. They inspired me and my closest friends to start a poetry club at our high school, which evolved into a place for all the outcasts to gather and be heard. A lot of it was just venting, sure, but there's something powerful about words. It became a way for me to express things that my autistic brain just couldn't process in normal conversation.
What I know about living is the pain is never just ours. Every time I hurt, another wound is an echo. So I keep listening for the moment when the grief becomes a window, when I can see what I couldn't see before. Through the glass of my most battered dream, I watched a dandelion lose its mind in the wind. And when it did, it scattered 1,000 seeds.
When we feel these deep, heavy emotions, it's for a reason. Not some God made you go through this so you'll be stronger bullshit. We feel so strongly because it's what makes us innately human. Emotion powers everything. It determines whether or not you get up in the morning, how you get along with others, what you're gonna eat for lunch. And when that emotion is so strong that we feel it can't be contained anymore, we release it. Sometimes productively, sometimes not.
Let me say right now for the record, I'm still gonna be here, asking this world to dance, even if it keeps stepping on my holy feet. You stay here with me, okay? You stay here with me, raising your bite against the bitter dark, your bright longing, your brilliant fist of loss. Friend, if the only thing we have to gain in staying is each other, my God, that is plenty. My God, that is enough. My God, that is so, so much for the light to give. Each of us at each other's backs, whispering over and over and over, live, live, live.
I'm gonna let you in on a secret. The only way to get through trauma is humanity. When we come together and see the real person underneath the ideology, everything changes. They become less of a demon and more of a neighbor. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that this is a simple thing to do. If anything, it can be terrifying to realize that the people who commit the most evil in this world are human, just like us. Reality might be a scary place, but it's also a more grounded, secure, and honest one. We don't get to choose who lives or who dies. We don't control how other people react to grief and loss. What we can control is our reactions, and how we come together after the fact to repair what damage has been done.
We value immigrants in our community and will do anything to protect them.
With concerns ICE could drive back, the community activists coordinated together to get the other worker down from the roof while others locked arms to ensure a safe exit. Then they lined their cars up to discreetly put him in one of them. They drove off in multiple vehicles so he could leave undetected.
We're committed to making our country a better place for all of us. Liberty and justice for all.